solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Completing the square is a method for really just rewriting an equation so that it's written as the square of a binomial. There are many instances when you use the process of completing the square, but in this video we're going to look at specifically how to use it to solve quadratic equations. The first step is to write the equation in the form 1x squared plus bx equals c. This isn't quite what we're used to in our standard form. We have to make sure that our a is 1. So if we do have a coefficient in front of x squared, we have to divide by that. And we also have to make sure that our constant term is on the other side of the equation. And once we get it in this starting form, we want to take half of b and square it. And then we'll add that to both sides of our equation. That will give us the one side, the polynomial, will then factor into the square of a binomial so that we can solve it using the square root property. So let's look at this first equation. 3x squared plus 12x minus 21 equals 0. I need this in the correct form. The first thing I need to take care of is this 3. I want that x squared to have a coefficient of 1. So my first step is going to be to divide each term on both sides of the equation by 3. So that's going to give me x squared plus 4x minus 7 equals 0. Now I want to get my constant term over here on the other side of the equation. So I have to add 7 to both sides of my equation. So that'll give me x squared plus 4x equals 7. Now I have written it kind of leaving a blank spot here in this position. Since these added up to 0, I don't have a constant term here anymore. So I've left space in there because my next step is to take half of b and square it. Well, my b in this problem is 4. So I want half of 4, which is 2. And then I want to square that, so 2 squared is 4. So what I want to do now is I want to add 4 to both sides of my equation. Once I do that, the first side of the equation is what we call a trinomial square. That means it will factor into a binomial squared. Well, the way you factor this is the x squared gives you an x in the first position. The 4 gives you a 2 in the second position. And then the middle term will have whatever this sign is. Or not the middle term, but in the middle here. So x squared plus 4x plus 4 factors into x plus 2 times x plus 2. So I can write that as x plus 2 squared. Now on the other side of the equation, the 7 plus the 4 gives me 11. Now, this is an equation that I can solve by taking the square root on both sides. So I'm going to take the square root on both sides of the equation. That'll give me x plus 2 equals a positive or a negative square root of 11. Remember, when you use your square root property, you have to use your positive and your negative square root. Now, this gives me 2 separate equations. I can take and add the 2. Oh, wait a minute. Let me write it as 2 separate equations first. x plus 2 equals the square root of 11, and x plus 2 equals a negative square root of 11. To solve both of these, I need to subtract the 2. So this would give me x equals negative 2 plus the square root of 11. And this one would give me x equals negative 2 minus the square root of 11. So these are my solutions. Let's look at one more. X squared plus 12x plus 20 equals 0. This time I have a leading coefficient of 1. So all I need to do to get it ready here is subtract the 20 from both sides of the equation. So I have x squared plus 12x. I'm going to leave some space here, equals negative 20. Now, I want to add half of b squared to both sides of the equation. So that's going to be half of 12 squared. Half of 12 is 6. So 6 squared is 36. I'm going to add 36 to both sides of my equation. So my first side is going to factor. I'm going to have an x as the first term in the parentheses, plus my 36 tells me I'm going to have a 6 in the second part of the parentheses. So this will be x plus 6 squared equals 16. Now I solve this equation by taking the square roots. So I have x plus 6 is equal to a positive or negative square root of 16, but the square root of 16 is 4, isn't it? So now I just have x plus 6 equals 4, and I have x plus 6 equals negative 4. So to solve that, I subtract the 6 from both sides. So this will give me a negative 2. And when I subtract the 6 from both sides on this other equation, I get negative 10.